once you do a cycle or a couple cycles and you've put on, 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, and then you go off, even if you get your testosterone back to normal high levels, you're not building any more muscle naturally. It's just not going to happen. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever's on your mind, bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. We are under 6 weeks away from the Olympia, and the road to the Iron Road to the Olympia is going to begin this upcoming week. We are going to bring you athlete interviews, preview segments, Iron debate, Dave reacting to the slew of progress pictures and videos, which are officially now going up. So I guess we're in the thick of progress picture, progress video season. Of course, this upcoming weekend is the Charroux Classic in France. That is the second to last open class show for qualification to this upcoming Olympia. And then, of course, the Legions, which is in about 10 days. So a lot of excitement between now and then. These next two shows are going to have a quality mix of Olympia qualified, and of course, those still in search of a ticket to Orlando. Let's go to the questions. The first two questions on this show, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, Dave, I need your feedback. Collagen versus whey. 60 years old, how much should either play a role in my diet? I seem to digest collagen better, so I have to stop whey altogether except post-workout. Post-workout peas, says, thank you for Devon or Devin show prep. Best placing ever this year.
I think that's my friend. But I'll say this. A lot of people, I remember back in the day when they had creatine first came out, and then they came out with this liquid creatine. It was like in a little dropper. And I've told this, I made this analogy before, but I'm going to use it again here. And people would put the creatine under their tongue. It was like one drop or something like that. And they'd be like, I don't get bloated from this creatine, and I don't have any digestion problems. It was because they really weren't using any degree of potency to the creatine. They weren't. A dropper doesn't have any creatine in it. You need like gram amounts of creatine. Same thing with protein. Hydrolyzed like collagen protein is basically ligaments and tendons that they've digested and made into this goo essentially, and then they kind of put a little flavoring in it. It's not a really high quality product. You're not going to build and repair muscle optimally. It's very low grade protein, to be honest with you. Whey, a lot of times whey gives people problems with digestion because a lot of whey proteins have lactose still in them. Remember, lactose is the milk sugar that's with the milk, and whey comes from milk. The problem is that nowadays people think that there's two kinds of whey. Usually we talk about in this industry: whey concentrate, which is kind of just you separate the liquid portion of the milk from the solid portion of the milk. The solid portion is the casein, what they make the cheese out of, and then the liquid portion is the whey. They dry that, and that's whey concentrate, which contains a lot of lactose in it. Okay, so there's a lot of milk sugar in there. A lot of people can't digest lactose, myself included. And if you just use a pure whey concentrate product, you'll probably get a lot of gas and diarrhea from it. they started refining it, and they created what's called a whey isolate, which is they're trying to isolate the whey protein away from the lactose component. And there's different degrees of how much they can separate that, but they're all called whey isolates. So whether you have a high quality whey isolate versus a lower quality whey isolate, they're still called whey isolate, and the companies can put that on the label in the ingredient list. So a lot of people will just buy the cheapest whey isolate they possibly can get, and a lot of times it's still has lactose in it, and enough to irritate your gut. We actually use the best whey isolate that money can buy, because I am so lactose intolerant that when I went to Glambia, which is the company that makes most of the whey in the world, I said, I want your best whey isolate, your highest, filtration rate isolate. And of course it's the most expensive, but it has probably, trace amounts of lactose in it. And if it doesn't bother my stomach, it's not going to bother anyone else's. You're much better off using a high quality whey isolate. And you can tell if you look at the isolized jug, it says 33 gram serving size. It's 28 grams of protein of that. And that no one has 28 grams of protein. Usually you see 23, 22, 24, sometimes 25. Very rarely do you get over 25, because most people don't use the highest grade isolate. And so there is some, because if it's not as high number wise, you're getting some lactose in there. And it's funny because I see some of these companies that have a whey isolate with 24, 25 grams of protein per serving, and they say lactose free on the front of the tub, which is ironic because it's no whey protein. Even mine you can't say lactose free because there's always trace amounts in there. But they say that because if you put the lactose or lactase enzyme in there with it, same thing with milk. You ever see this? They sell lactose free milk and the first ingredient is milk. So how do they do that? Because they have this stupid rule that if you add lactase enzyme, then you can say it's lactose free, because theoretically the lactase enzyme will digest the lactose. Never does completely. Doesn't even do it. I tried lactose free milk once. I almost couldn't make it to the bathroom. That's how bad I had to poop my pants. So you get what you pay for, and so don't look at lower grade protein saying, oh, well, this doesn't bother my stomach. Well, yeah, of course it doesn't, because it doesn't work as effectively. Whey isolate is the number one, protein you can probably use. Now, the egg albumin is pretty good too. The problem with egg albumin, it's actually more expensive than whey isolate nowadays, because eggs, the whole scandal with eggs in this country. Plus, it has a salty taste, eggs. So it's hard to flavor it as nicely. Whey is perfect because it's neutral tasting. Just pure whey isolate tastes like nothing. It's like chalk. So then if you have a good flavoring system, which we use at Species Nutrition, you can make it taste really good with zero carbs, added to the mix. So once again, look at the quality of what you're putting into your body. If you had a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, you wouldn't go to the gas station and put the low octane gas in there. You would want the car to perform at maximum. You'd want the engine to be protected. You'd put the highest grade, right? 93, 94, whatever's out there, octane. Do it the same thing for your body. Why would you put anything less than the best into your body? I always tell people that to save $2, to save $3, it's not worth it. We waste so much money on other things that are frivolous. Spend the money on good quality, not only just supplements, but good quality foods too. Don't buy crappy food if you want to be the best bodybuilder out there. You got to get high quality ingredients so that your absorbability is maximized and your muscle repair and growth is going to be maximized. And that's the best advice I can give you. I did that my whole career. I still do this to this day. Even when I had no money, I did the same thing. You have to be a smart shopper.
Second question, again, these questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. How much of the BPC 157 TB500 should I take each day to help me heal? More importantly, is it really worth taking?
I was always a big believer in growth hormone for regeneration purposes or healing from injuries. And after I had my thyroid removed, because I had thyroid cancer, I'm just too scared to take GH because, I took tons of GH my whole life. But, when you have an active case of cancer or potentially some cells still left in your body, which potentially I could have, right? GH can make them grow faster so GH doesn't cause cancer, but if you have it, you probably don't want to take it. So I opted to use the BPC 157 and TB 500, which I got from titanmedicalcenter.com. I used it after my ankle surgery, and I used it after my cardiac surgery I had this past 12 months. And I definitely noticed my healing was much better. It was probably comparable to taking growth hormone, not from a muscle building perspective, but from a healing perspective. I took 200 micrograms of each one of those twice a day. And then once I got past the first 4 weeks after the surgery, I was alternating. So one day I would take the TB 500, one day I would take the BPC 157. I would take it in the morning, and I would take 200 micrograms of either one as maintenance for another like 3 months after that. Now I'm not taking it at all, but I used it for at least 4 months post-surgery for both surgeries. And I felt it worked really well. So I think for healing purposes, it's really good. And once again, it's a lot cheaper than growth hormone. So, but if you're using GH already because, you're bodybuilding and you're competing and you're in the gym. So, I mean, you might not need to use the BPC. I think GH is a really good healer as well. And back in the day, when I would have minor surgeries and stuff like that, I would use GH all the time for healing. And it seemed to do the job really, really well. I remember when I had my wisdom teeth pulled once. I went home. I took a shot of GH right after I drank a shake, because I couldn't chew on that side, and I went to sleep. I felt like when I woke up, I feel like I was healed. I was actually ready. I was eating solid food later that night already. So, take it for what it's worth. These questions do come from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. You can download from your iTunes or Android store. It's $29 a month. You get me as a coach in your back pocket. All my videos, anything I've ever written, all my writings in one place. You can ask questions. I answer them in an open forum. Everyone sees everyone's questions, everyone's answers, all my protocols, off-season pre-contests, drug cycles, diets, all in that app. It's a great, great resource. Plus, I do a Q&A video every single week exclusively for the app members, in addition to what we're doing here at Ask Dave. So you get a lot of value for $29 a month, and I know a lot of people use that. I'm kind of like their coach in their back pocket. It's a great resource, and you know what? I do it. Granted, I'm trying to make a few bucks, but I'm doing it also because it's a great service to have all that information in one place, plus have access to me any time of the day to answer your questions.
How dare you want to make a few bucks? Let's go to our Instagram and Facebook questions. We've been getting a lot of good questions on our Facebook page as well, so we appreciate that. If you're not already following us there on Facebook, just look up RxMuscle. And on Instagram, official_RxMuscle. Let's go to, so this is a good one because, we get questions about coming off, but this one is specific to your ability to build muscle after being enhanced. So I don't know exactly what context I mean. This is like off season, or I guess if you're done being enhanced. The question is from Brian S. Will it affect your ability to build muscle, assuming I guess you're going to stay natural there on out?
Once you do a cycle or a couple cycles and you've put on, 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, and then you go off, even if you get your testosterone back to normal high levels, you're not building any more muscle naturally. It's just not going to happen because you've already kind of built probably way more muscle with the steroids you used than you ever could naturally. So you're like beyond your genetic capability. And now you want to try to like grow with nothing in you, basically, or just at a high normal physiological level. It's probably not going to happen. You could maintain your muscle that you gained from taking all that gear, with high normal physiological levels, or even if you went on HRT, you would maintain it no problem. Getting bigger, probably not going to happen. I hate to break it to you, but there's only so much you can do naturally. And once you supersede that with the gear that you took, you really can't go beyond that anymore.
Usually I say these kind of questions towards the end. If you could interview any bodybuilder, alive or dead, who would it be and why? And what would be your top 3 questions for them?
This is almost like an answer I need to prepare. It would obviously be Arnold, because I haven't interviewed Arnold. I think he's the only one I really haven't interviewed that I would like to. I mean, Joe Eater would have been good, but he was, when I was kind of in the interviewing stage, he was kind of like really old, and he really wasn't on top of his game sharpness wise. So that really was off the table. But I guess Arnold, yeah, I would have to be Arnold. As far as what questions I'd ask him, I don't know. I have to sit down and think about it. I mean, Arnold's been asked everything in the book, so I would sit down and have to come up with questions. But I think that his documentary that he did on Netflix is probably one of the most honest, best documentaries I've seen on anyone. And because it was so honest, and he was just him basically just saying, you know what, I'm done with everything I did. I was an actor, I was a governor, I was a top level bodybuilder, Mr. Olympia 7 times. This is the real story. This is what happened. This is who I am. This is where I screwed up. This is where I was. This is why I was successful. But I'd like to ask him questions along those lines of like what he discussed in there. Since he seems to be more of an open book now, I would say that Arnold would have to be the interview I'd want.
Let's go to Matthew Albay. How does exogenous insulin affect aldosterone? If insulin hyperabsorbs everything and electrolytes numbers have to change, which aldosterone controls?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so I guess, how does exogenous insulin affect aldosterone?
It doesn't really have a direct effect on aldosterone. Now, sometimes exogenous fast-acting insulin will make you retain more fluid. But that's really mostly because it's driving nutrients into the muscle cells, and that's pulling fluid with it. I don't think it has a direct. As far as look, I'm pretty good hormonally. I don't know of any direct correlation between exogenous insulin use and increased aldosterone levels. I know that estrogen raises aldosterone levels, and there are other hormones that can mess with the water balance hormones, like antidiuretic hormone. I know Yohimbe will raise that. But as far as I know, insulin only causes fluid retention a lot of times because it's a storage hormone. If you ever see a type 1 diabetic who eats like a ton of sugar and has to take a lot of insulin, they get really, really bloated. But what happens with them is a lot of times is they get dehydrated too. Because if you're dehydrated, exogenous insulin doesn't work well, and you have to use more and more and more of it. And we just know that along with insulin usage in excessive amounts, we're talking about fast acting, not long acting, you do get fluid retention. I don't know if it's via, I don't believe it's via an aldosterone mechanism. I think it's just via the fact that insulin pulls fluid with it when it stores carbs in the muscle cells. And so you get a little bit of a bloated effect in it. Because think about it. If there's not enough liquid there, it'll pull the fluid out of the bloodstream. It can pull it from anywhere, but you get this hyper hydrated like type of look, but you see it even in the tissues of your face and everything like that. So once again, I don't believe that there's any correlation with aldosterone. I could be wrong, but exogenous fast-acting insulin will make you retain fluid if you take too much of it.
So this question is specific for a 43-year-old. I guess if you want to splice it up into for a 43-year-old more versus more of a general age group. The question is about a good cycle for cutting. So, I mean, again, he's asking specific to a 43-year-old. If you want to maybe expand it a little bit more to general audience.
I've said this a million times. I'll say it again. And I always preface that to make sure that people know I'm not losing my mind, that I don't remember. But, steroids don't burn fat. They build muscle. So, you could lose weight and look really good just taking testosterone if you wanted to. What bodybuilders do pre-contest is they use certain steroids that, when you are lean, they make your body look harder without fluid retention. So if that makes sense, like Winstrol, Masteron, even Trenbolone acetate, they will harden up a body that's lean and make it look really dry and grainy looking. But it's not because of any magical quality they have to get rid of water or burn fat. It's because they just don't hold water, these steroids. They're not fluid retentive type steroids. So that's why people the last 6 to 8 weeks will use Winstrol and Masteron. It's not because they burn fat better than others. I mean, Anavar is a great hardening drug, if you want to call it that. And when I say hardening, it doesn't burn fat and make you harder. When you lose the fat via diet and cardio, or whatever fat burners you're on, and you're on Anavar, the muscle will look harder because there's no fat obscuring it, if that makes sense. So once again, prior to a show, the last 6 to 8 weeks, we'll use drugs that have less fluid retention, even though I still keep testosterone in, because testosterone should always be a baseline in your cycle. The, Winstrol, Masteron, Anavar, drugs like that will give the muscle a harder appearance than if you were to take, say, Deca and Equipoise pre-contest, which might give you a more fluid retentive look. potentially when you carbed up, which is usually not a big deal anyway, because most people take diuretics. So it's a trade-off. I think a lot of the drugs we use and a lot of the drug cycles we use are by convention, meaning that this is just the way it's been done for 30 years, and everyone pretty much follows suit on it. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You could probably take testosterone and DECA for a show and look just as hard, just as big, just as grainy. If you diet down and you lose all that body fat, it probably really doesn't matter what anabolics you're on. But you know what? You got to switch stuff up anyway every so often. So it's nice to have what we call the diet stack, just for that most people will save for when they're dieting for a show. The body responds well to it because it's not used all year round. And then we have what we call the off-season stack, which are the long-acting injectables that, once again, do their thing just like any other drug does their thing. Also, the good thing is the long-acting injectables tend to be better anabolics in terms of building muscle. No one really is so worried about building muscle pre-contest. They're really worried about just looking grainy, granity, hard. And high androgen, high non-aromatizing androgens like trenbolone acetate and halotestin will give the body that look, not necessarily building muscle, but just because it hardens up a lean muscle.
Let's go to Alexander Ruin. Coach, I've had arguments with people on cooked and uncooked meals. On the packet, it says 24 grams protein per 100 grams sold, whereas you and everyone say 100-gram cooked meat is 24 grams protein, around that number. How can I tell if they're lying on the packaging?
Well, yeah, they're giving you the values based on what's in the package. You know, if you cook it, excessively and cook off some of that weight, it's not going to have that much protein in it anymore. The good news is that if you fish and chicken breast, lean sources of protein, don't really lose a lot of weight. Go try this. Cook a piece of salmon. I sear my salmon. It's the same weight when it's cooked and when it's raw. Red meat, especially ground beef, will lose a lot of weight because it's so much fat in there. It's just melting off, and then you pat it dry with paper towels, and so you might lose an ounce or two. But that's why I tell people to weigh their foods, after they cook it. But for fish, lean fishes, especially white fishes, they don't lose anything really. I mean, so it's not as much of a concern, And once again, it's not a big deal if you're an ounce or two short, especially if your body looks good. Don't get so carried away and caught up on it. Tuna in a can, it's already cooked, so it doesn't even matter. So very few foods you're going to have to really adjust for. Like I said, the fattier foods, you might lose a little bit. If you cook your salmon to death, you might lose a little bit. But most people who eat salmon just sear it, and so you're not losing anything on that sense.
VIP left to court. During contest prep cutting, is it okay to take carbs post-workout and form a meal instead of taking it right after the training, like drinking only protein shakes after training, and then 1 hour later adding carbs in meal like chicken and rice?
Yeah, that's fine. It shouldn't be a problem with doing that. Once again, protein is the most important thing post-workout. The carbs are just replenishing glycogen storage. Carbs don't build muscle. They're just a fuel source. So if you did I usually in my post-workout shakes, if I'm not dieting for a competition, will do some carbs and whey isolate, and then I'll have my meal, like you said, about an hour and a half later with carbs and protein. Again, usually some fat in that meal. Usually post-workout, the only thing I don't really eat is fat, unless I'm eating a meal. But if I'm doing a shake, I'm just going to do carbs and protein.
Let's go to Ian Chambers. Do bodybuilders still use orimiten, aminoglutamine? We used it last 2 weeks before a show in the 90s.
You mean aminoglutamine? Is that what he's?
He spelled it as aminoglutamine. So
I think it's.
I don't know if it's spelled incorrectly or.
Yeah, it was called Cytodrin. I don't know anyone who uses it anymore. I always said it was a very dangerous drug. There was one coach that used to like to tell people to take that. And I think they pulled the drug from the market, actually, because it was so dangerous. People thought that it dried you out because it blocked cortisol, which is a catabolic hormone, which it did. It did block cortisol, but that's not what dried you out. Aminoglutamine or Cytodrin blocked the production of all steroidal hormones in the body, all of them. That means testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, aldosterone, corticosterone. all the steroidal hormones were blocked. So the one hormone, if you think about that's responsible for the fluid retention the most is aldosterone. So if you inhibit aldosterone, you're going to lose a shitload of fluid, right? It's like taking aldactone essentially. So most people dried out not because it was an anti-cortisol drug. It was because they were actually drying out because they had no aldosterone in their body. The problem is that it's dangerous because it inhibits too many steroidal hormones and it can inhibit clotting factors too. So if you, God forbid, you had a stomach ulcer or you cut yourself in some kind of internal like bleeding from colitis or anything, that you can literally bleed to death. And I know people that have had problems like that. So it's not a good drug. It's not safe. It's one of those drugs that you probably should never use.
There's a question about B12. Let me see if I can find it. Yes, from LCT Garneau. You already said that you take vitamin B12 injections. What is the protocol, dosage, timing, frequency? And then I guess he goes on to also ask about D3 injections and if they're worth it.
Yeah, I don't take vitamin B12 injections. I used them back in the day to kind of cut winstrol with or test suspension because winstrol suspension and test suspension hurt so much that what we would do is we would mix a half a cc of vitamin B12, injectable B12, and we would shake it up, and it would make it easier to inject the winstrol or the testosterone suspension because the particles of the suspension, whether it be winstrol or testosterone, it was kind of like a chalky consistency, and sometimes it would clog the syringe and it would hurt when it went in. If you mixed it with a half cc of half an ml of B12 and you shook it up, it just went in easier and it didn't hurt. I don't know why. I don't know what the buffering mechanism was on that, but that's just the way it was. Now, nowadays, what I recommend is not that you use injectable B12, is that when you take B12 supplements, that you use a methylcobalamin or a methylated form of B12 because that's the activated form. And a lot of people, myself included, I didn't even know this until I tested my DNA. I didn't know that I didn't methylate B12. And if you don't methylate B12, you can't store it. B12 is one of these water-soluble vitamins that can actually be stored in the liver. And it's really necessary for the production of red blood cells so you don't become anemic, protein synthesis reactions. So you need B12. So taking supplements of B12 every day is great, but if you can't methylate it, you can't store it. Now, my V-mineralized formula just so happens to have methyl B12 in it, so you don't have to worry about that. So since I found out that methyl B12 is a more potent activated form of B12, there's no reason to take injections of the B12 because the injections you're taking are not methylated. And so there's no benefit of that. So hopefully that answers that question. The only reason, like I said, you would use injectable B12 nowadays would be to cut winstrol or suspension.
But I have to say, I just noticed your shirt right now. That is actually, let me bring you up here. This is pretty sweet. That's nice.
There is no tomorrow. And then the back. Oh, let me see if I can turn around here. Can you see the back?
Yes. Yes. I was going to say that's from Rocky 3, but you know who said that line, right?
Apollo Creed. I know
yes.
every word of that movie.
Yes. Yes.
Because you know what? Everyone says, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. Today is tomorrow. Yep. You do it now. And I hear that with bodybuilders saying, oh, well, I'm going to catch up on my cardio tomorrow. I got to eat this weekend because my aunt's coming to town and she's making me an apple pie. There is no tomorrow, guys. If you want to be your best, you do it now.
It's like that scene where he looks over to Adrian's. It's over. It's over. But yeah, quality shirt. Good stuff. Let's go to Wolf Lover. Love the name. If our bodies have myostatin to prevent us from getting too big, how do steroids give us the opposite effect? And which compound, if any, can prevent, block, or reduce myostatin?
Myostatin is a relatively new protein that they found that our genes express, and that they, first, no one really knows how it works, but it inhibits muscle growth. By what mechanism? I don't even know, to be honest with you. And I'm being completely honest. I don't make up shit if I don't know something. I don't know what mechanism, but they find that people with less myostatin in their body tend to build muscle more easily. So supposedly back in the day, Victor Conte, if you've followed the Balco scandal with Barry Bonds and all those guys and Marion Jones and all the runners, Victor Conte tested a bunch of pro bodybuilders back in the day. Levrone and Flex Wheeler and Nasser and all these guys for myostatin, the myostatin gene. And Flex Wheeler was the only one who came back with no myostatin, meaning that his ability to put muscle on is probably the easiest of anyone out there. I don't know if they tested Levrone. I can't believe Levrone has any myostatin either, because I've never seen anyone grow as easily as him either. But that's what they came back with. Now, there are drugs or there are like peptides out there that theoretically block myostatin. The problem is that myostatin is constantly being produced. So just taking like a couple doses of these, I think it's called follistatin is what the myostatin inhibitors are called, is not going to do it. You need this happening all the time. So the only way to really inhibit myostatin and get a muscle building effect from it would be to inject some kind of a DNA vector into yourself, and using CRISPR technology, and have your body have this vector cleave out your myostatin gene and get rid of it. And if that would have happened, theoretically, you would build muscle at a more accelerated rate. In other words, if you remember, probably the kid's got to be older now, but I remember when there was a baby born that was myostatin negative. It was really muscular looking baby. It was like super muscular for a newborn. And they said the kid was stronger and he would recover faster, and he was absolutely healthy in every aspect. In other words, it didn't affect his heart muscle, it didn't affect the small intestines or the intestinal musculature, only the skeletal muscle. And I don't know if he ever went on to play sports or not. No one ever followed up on it, probably not. But that person was born myostatin negative. It was actually a kid that was produced by two athletes they were both Olympians, which doesn't mean that they had anything done to themselves. It just means that they probably were superior athletes because they had no myostatin and they had kids together and they produced a myostatin negative baby. But I suspect in the future, people will figure out ways to get rid of that myostatin gene in their bodies. I don't know if I would want to be a test guinea pig on that one, but once they do it, the floodgates will open. We'll probably see even bigger bodybuilders.
I tried to look it up, but I'm just seeing Photoshop pictures of babies, and it's pretty. Let's just not go there. Take a couple of more questions. Bill Alhamida, I know you were speaking about insulin and short-acting earlier on in the episode. So the question is, would you consider long-acting insulin a safer option than short-acting when looking to running GH with insulin while bulking, but concerned about the risk associated with short-acting insulin?
The best, without going into a whole diatribe about insulin, you use long-acting insulin when you're running high fasting blood sugars. Why? Because what that's telling you is that you don't have enough insulin production in your body, especially the bodybuilder. We're not talking about fat people, okay, or type 2 diabetes. We're talking about bodybuilders who are running high fasting blood sugars, who are not putting on weight the way they should, and high fasting blood sugars are indicating that their bodies are not able to keep up with insulin production. Those people are best served by taking a long-acting insulin, because what it does is it takes the burden off the body of how much insulin the body has to produce, so that when the body has to crank insulin out, like for big carb meals, the insulin's there to release. If you're taking faster acting insulins during the day, it's not going to help you when you're sleeping overnight and your liver cranks out ridiculous amounts of glucose right prior to you waking up, and then you wake up with high blood sugars anyway. So most people just need a little help all the time, and that's what a long-acting insulin does. It's always there in the back. It's like taking a shot of testosterone, a long-acting testosterone ester. It's always there, right? You don't get up and down levels. If you were to take a shot of test suspension, you're going to get ups and downs and ups and downs. But if you take a long-acting, it's always there. That's what you want with insulin. For replacement, you want to take a long-acting insulin to help your body maybe make up for what your body can't make naturally, and everything should be fine. I've never, to be honest with you, aside from guys that have like a family history, very rarely do I see bodybuilders that have high like post-meal sugars, meaning that 2 hours post-meal, which is called your postprandial blood sugar, which should be under 130. Very rarely do I see guys with 170, 180, 190 blood sugars, 2 hours after a meal. Most people can bring their blood sugar down immediately. It's the what we call first phase insulin production that happens overnight that they can't handle, because the volume of insulin they're producing is just not enough. And so it's safer to take a longer acting, because you're not going to go hypo from it. You don't have to figure how much food am I going to eat. You just take the insulin and you don't worry about it because it's working in the background. So safer, better blood sugar control, and you will see those hemoglobin A1Cs, which is your three-month average of your blood sugar, come way, way down. When I think mine was about 5.4 or 5.5, which is, most people tell you that's normal, but I'm a neurotic and I wanted mine lower. So when I started using a long-acting insulin at night, now my hemoglobin A1Cs are 4.9, which is really healthy. That's like, youthful levels when you're in your teens. And I do that because I know that I'm on the borderline, and I don't want to be on the borderline because I don't want to run slightly high blood sugars, because that's cumulative over years and years and years. And I'm planning, might not happen, I'm planning on living a long time. So when I'm 90, I want to be able to see. I want my kidneys to still function. So I don't want 30 years of accumulative blood sugars in my tissues. That's a personal decision on your part. Do you want to do it, or yes or no? But what I'm seeing is with a lot of pro bodybuilders and top level bodybuilders who are eating 6 to 8 times a day, they are running higher fasting blood sugars. And I get them all on long acting insulins because my job as their coach is, number one, to maximize their performance, but to protect their health as well.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Right now on the channel, actually just dropping today. So again, full disclosure, we had our little situation last week, but now that we're back, we are trying to get caught up on some of the videos that we recorded last week that were not on this platform, that may have gone elsewhere. And one of those shows is the Lee Priest and Jimmy the Bull show. So new episode that has not yet dropped on YouTube is now live on the channel. Go check it out. Lee and Jimmy's brand new show. We're about 7-8 episodes deep. It's an absolutely, it really combines everything as far as the Lee Priest experience brings to YouTube. It's hilarious, it's insightful, thoughtful. It's a really, it's Lee Priest and Jimmy the Bull like you've never seen before. So again, if you haven't already checked it out, check it out. Brand new episode right now live on the channel. Of course, all new episodes of the After Hours podcast, of Heavy Muscle Radio, and then of course tomorrow, back with Lee Priest and Iron Rage. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. Of course, now we are going to roll right into the Iron Road to the Olympia. Hard to believe that the Olympia is less than 6 weeks away. So preview segment galore here on this channel. Subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.